Everyone, and welcome to the August 16th regular meeting of the Pine-Richland School Board. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Ms. Williams.
Mr. Lyons?
Here.
Mrs. Misbach? Here. Mr. Kashani?
Here.
Mr. DiTullio?
Here.
Mrs. Hayden? Here. Dr. Mihalik?
Here.
Dr. Meyer?
Here.
Mr. Moy?
Here.
Mrs. Swope?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Before we move into our agenda, I do just have a brief statement for the community. As we consider revisions to our health and safety plan for the new school year this evening, I want to say that we cannot distinguish ourselves here in Pine-Richland from other districts around the country by the topics we're dealing with, be it diversity, equity, and inclusion, health and safety, masking in schools. We can't distinguish ourselves by the passion we feel for our students, or even the decisions that we make on those topics. All of these answers have been taken before, both pro and con. Hundreds of school board meetings across the country have been taking place each week this month around the country, dealing with these issues and others. Whatever decisions we make will not distinguish us. There are as many responses as there are school districts. But I do believe that there's more agreement in our community than disagreement. The only way we could really stand out would be to engage each other, to listen to each other with civility and respect, to understand the other's perspectives. Those who disagree with you are not the enemy of all that is good. They are simply people with a different perspective. And hopefully we can keep that in mind as we proceed with tonight's deliberations. We will be moving toward an informational item from the administration first, prior to the recognition of visitors tonight, item 1.02, the health and safety plan. After it's presented, the board will have the opportunity to ask questions and clarification. I ask, and it's a fine line, that we reserve our deliberative comments for later in the agenda when we take action on it in item 2.01. Between the delivery of the information and that deliberation, we also have the opportunity to hear comments from the public, both online and in person. With that, I'll turn it over. Executive session. One more comment, right? The board met in executive session on August 10th, 2021, and on August 16th, 2021, to discuss litigation matters involving pending complaints filed with the United States Department of Education, Office for Civil Rights, by Mr. Tom Baxter, at OCR complaint number 03-20-1097, and to discuss threatened litigation involving investigation of alleged sexual assaults. At both these executive sessions, the board also held an information and strategy session regarding the negotiation of a memorandum of understanding to a collective bargaining agreement with the Pine-Richland Education Association related to virtual instruction. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Stovener, if you could pull up the presentation, thank you. And is that working on the other screens as well? Okay. Okay, thank you, Mr. Lyons. And again, tonight we will share our best thinking with our community in terms of what has been happening over the last 6 weeks or so, what have we learned, and how has that influenced our recommendations. We did share this information with our community via an e-blast last Friday, and so I will talk about some of the same points tonight, add some additional detail in terms of our thinking. First and foremost, we're excited to welcome back our students. We are really looking forward to in-person instruction with our students this year at all 6 of our schools. And this has been our top priority. We know, and our community values, 99.8% of our families want their children back in in-person learning. It is what our staff wants to be able to best support students. And we know that in addition to the academic benefits of being back in school, there are so many other benefits socially and emotionally for our students. In addition to the educational program during the day, returning to in-person learning for our students includes those co- and extracurricular activities that are so important to their development. At the same time, as we have that as our fundamental top-line goal, we also want to limit disruptions to daily attendance. We know that routine is critical for students, and so we want to provide a recommendation that we believe accomplishes both of those goals, with the understanding that adjustments may become necessary depending on how the situation evolves. So simply, our recommendation to start the year, and in our communication we sort of bolded and underlined the word start, but we want to start the 21-22 school year with full in-person instruction, a series of mitigation strategies that include required masking indoors for all students, staff, and visitors. And again, the simple rationale for that is in-person learning is the most important goal of our community. And in addition to the health protections, this approach provides a foundation for continuity of in-person learning. It significantly reduces the risk of quarantine-based disruptions to our students because, again, we understand how important continuity and regular attendance is to the learning process. And again, that's tied to CDC and Allegheny County sort of guidance, which states that students who are masked and would otherwise be considered a close contact do not need to be quarantined if they're in that 3 to 6 foot range if there is masking in place within the schools. So what has happened, sort of where are we now, where were we before? And we'll talk about this in a couple of slides, but in early July, our country and our region was seeing the lowest levels of cases at any point since the pandemic began. And the guidance that existed at that time reflected that. And so when we came in early July for the initial recommendation for a health and safety plan, we were in different circumstances. A lot has occurred in that time. Guidance has changed from those agencies. And one of the things that's occurred and been a part of that is that in our county, we've moved from low transmission to moderate, from moderate to substantial, and today, for the very first time, Allegheny County is considered high transmission from the CDC's indicator. And so part of that, too, that increase in cases, conditions, and the change in guidance from those agencies is an understanding of the Delta variant and what that means to healthcare experts, and also the reality that our K-6 schools include students who are not yet able to receive a vaccine. Since a vaccine is only available to those who are interested, 12 and older, it is not yet available 11 and under. And again, the rationale includes recommendations of Dr. Bogan and other experts who participate in our Healthcare Leadership Council. So this slide just reinforces and hyperlinks, I think, Mr. Lyons' comments sort of tied to the third bullet there, which is there's 14,000 or so school districts across the country. There are 500 public school districts in Pennsylvania. And a lot of these discussions are happening in each and every one of those districts because there's not a broader approach. And that's okay for our purposes because we know that we need to make a recommendation and we want our recommendation to be informed by as much as we can learn and understand. I've shared this in past. It just reflects the change in cases and conditions and transmission level. This is the CDC data tracker dashboard. So you can see Allegheny County is now red. Today is literally the first time that we have been red for a long period of time with the changes in case counts. This slide shows the information that, this comes from the Allegheny Alerts from Allegheny County. And what it really reflects from early May is that we were headed in a great direction in terms of cases. And conditions were improving, and that occurred all the way through, the beginning of July. Since that time, what we can see, the gray vertical column, second from right, is the cases in a week in the county. And then on the right is the incidence rate as reported by the PDE COVID dashboard. And so again, what we see is after that mid-early July time period, we have been not only increasing, but increasing rapidly with cases. What we know and what we learned last year was that cases in the county, in the region, correlated to cases within our district of students and staff. I mean, we are a part of the community is part of us. There are no invisible walls between communities or boundaries. We live in a community that's highly, mobile in terms of work and engagement in a number of activities. The other, and I think really the most critical part of our recommendation is around this first bullet point, which is the recommendation for in-person learning for 99.8% of our students, with a series of mitigation strategies, but masking being one of those strategies to start the year. That protects us against the need to quarantine more than anything else that we can do. That gives our students the opportunity to find continuity and a rhythm in their learning, to establish those routines, and to be ready to, again, get engaged and excited about a new school year. It also helps protect the adult population. So one of the challenges facing school districts everywhere is, again, managing staff and being able to do so with the challenge of substitutes and other things that are needed just to operate school well day to day. And so this serves to support that as well. At the last board meeting, we talked about asking 4 questions. Well, at that time it was 3. We added a 4th question just to see into the parents' mind and hear some of their thinking about masks specifically, also about whether the transmission level in the community was something that influenced their thinking, and then finally about voluntarily sharing information. We asked that to staff as well, and you can see the combination of planning to or willing to responses for parents and then also for staff. We shared this data with our community publicly last Tuesday, so it has been out there. This is the language from the CDC guidance that talks about the exclusion, the exemption from quarantine for when there's masking and other mitigation in place. This is for students. This is truly the critical part of our recommendation. So in addition to the health benefits, it is really the prevention of quarantine and the disruptive impact that could have on learning for students that is at the heart of our recommendation. These data are available online for those who would like to see that. We all want a return to a semblance of normalcy, no question about it. And we believe that our top line goal of in-person learning every day for 99.8% of our kids, that means close to 1,500 students here at the high school, 750 students at the middle school, 1,100 students at Eden Hall, that full and regular in-person learning with the mitigation that we're talking about is a huge positive step towards more of that normalcy. We know, because we feel it ourselves, I certainly feel it, but we know that there's frustration, there's fatigue, people are tired, and when coming off the heels of the summer, when levels were low and people were largely outside doing things, that's a totally different environment than what it means with increasing cases and bringing everybody back into an indoor environment in schools. There's so much in the news, in headlines. We know that there are strongly held positions on this, and ultimately what we're hoping is that we can truly focus on learning for every student every day, that we can return to school in a way that allows us to focus on learning, to get students back and engaged with their friends and classmates, involved in extra and co-curricular activities, and hopefully stay involved in those without disruption due to quarantine or other factors. We also know that from the literature and the experts that while the direct risk of hospitalizations or the most adverse outcomes for children is extremely low. And we realize that the reality of disruption due to quarantine is high. And it's for that second reason that we really believe strongly in the recommendation we have for you tonight. We effectively utilized masks last year. We had incredible cooperation. Again, we understand the fatigue, but it was really well done by our community, our staff, and our students. We know that there are certain cases, exemptions, and we have them listed here if wearing a face covering would either cause a medical condition or exacerbate an existing one, including respiratory issues that impede breathing, or if there's a mental health condition or disability. There are reasons for exemption, and we understand that. We had that in place last year, but it is our hope that those are rare. One of the things we talked about briefly at the last meeting, and I believe this is important. I don't know that there are clear and bright lines, but one of the pieces we put in our e-blast to families is, as conditions change or as guidance changes, just like where we were in early July, if conditions change and guidance changes, then it's possible that, again, we remove some of the mitigation. But we're not there at this point. At this point, we're in high transmission, and we're seeing an increase in cases. We also believe that there may be an appropriate time for us to look differently at K-6 versus 7-12. Again, K-6 because a vaccine is not yet available for those families who would choose to have their children have that. And so there might be a time, depending on the transmission levels, where we look at those levels differently. But we, again, do not believe that that time is now, given the transmission level and given the guidance that's in place. In early July, the green starburst was way left. It was in the blue. Each time we update this, it seems we shift it further to the right. But what you see in blue outline is traditional with some restrictions. So while the conditions are worsening, the mitigation that we have recommended, and I believe very effectively implemented last year, have us still in a place where we can bring back 99.8% of our students for in-person learning every day. So listed here are some of those examples. I won't go through each of them. I will say on buses, one of the huge helps that our community provided last year is we had a lot of parents willing to transport their child, so we reduced the number of students actually on the bus. We don't believe we need that to the same degree we had it last year, but if there are examples where that works for a family and they're okay doing that, it does help the bus environment. But masks are a mandated part of the buses federally. The other thing we do, we keep windows down, ventilation moving throughout those areas. In classrooms, what we anticipate is using the size of the room, not impacting the way we deliver the programs, but using the size of the room to maximally spread out the desks, to go back to that sort of old school columns and rows kind of approach, because it allows us to take advantage of the square footage in the various different spaces. We'll continue to encourage the teacher zone. But what that means is that's the way we would start the year. We would start the year because it helps do the best we can within the spaces that we have in order to limit the risk of disruption due to quarantine and other factors. Cafeteria, again, we've used alternate spaces. We think also there's a chance to maybe even use some outdoor spaces. We just have to manage that. So it depends on, obviously, the weather. It depends on some other factors. But if we can use those examples here at the high school, for example, we had students who, weather permitting, would go outside a little bit and eat. We think that's a possibility. We just have to figure out how to make that work in various buildings. In terms of athletics and activities, and I would include as an example to that, even something like homecoming. We want all of those activities that are traditionally part of what we're doing, want to be able to find a way to do those in person. There might need to be some modifications, but our heart and mind is in trying to find ways to make everything we can possibly make work. That's what we want. We want students actively engaged in school. We want clubs and activities happening. We want some of those other events again, using homecoming as an example. In outdoor environments, so athletically, most fall sports are outside, and there's a lower risk outside. There's one sport that is an inside sport in the fall, and so again, we see the athletes being able to be unmasked during competition there, with some other things that are happening in practice, but otherwise we have, masking if they're using locker rooms or some other things is our recommendation. And again, there's other details to talk about in terms of vaccination status. Again, for those who are willing to voluntarily share that will help our health services department manage contact tracing if it becomes necessary. So we're asking for board action tonight on the recommended health and safety plan. We still have a series of communications and work to do following action by the board. And again, one of the things that we believe strongly is that probably every month we come back together, we're going to be talking about this for the foreseeable future. What is happening? What is changing? What does that mean to us? What are we seeing in our schools? Just like we did last year, this will be an ongoing conversation. We have to continue to learn and understand and then make adjustments as needed. Our hope is that we can set a solid foundation for in-person learning so that all those relationships and connections and getting grounded in the new school year can happen with the least amount of disruption possible. Thank you.
Just a couple things to add there. Thinking about one thing that we talked about as well as we discussed quarantining and the concern for obviously students needing to quarantine, there's an impact that we think about with families as well. Families that have both parents working and how that shifts schedules and whatnot. So all those are results of students needing to quarantine. So again, any mitigation efforts we can put in place to limit that, we think is positive. In terms of things like homecoming, just as an awareness, our high school administrators have already started to meet with the student leadership groups to talk about, ways to make homecoming happen in a way that students are excited about it too. Sometimes adults are excited about it one way, but students are not as excited. So we are talking to students about that. Real life example just last week in terms of having to shift and modify. We had band camp last week. And, again, as we continue to get guidance and information, our directors had to make adjustments, and we're living that and feeling that right now as the opening week of athletics. So a little bit of a request of students and families to bear with us as we learn more and make adjustments. But sometimes they're on the fly. Sometimes we're able to have those in advance with detailed health and safety plans. But we're learning that's a little bit of the nature of this pandemic, is the flexibility and the ongoing changes and readiness to adjust.
I would also just like to add on the quarantine piece, since last year there's a lot that's happened with that actual quarantine period too. So if you recall, last year people were in quarantine for 14 days with the possibility that it's passed around within the household, and then that keeps getting extended. Sometimes it was up to 21 days, etc. So now what we know is that quarantine is 10 days, and it can be shortened further if you get a test between days 5 and 7, can return on day 8. The likelihood with the eligibility for those who in the household are vaccinated or of age to be vaccinated, for that transmission to continue within the household, it's also less likely as well. So if people are students, staff members, asked to quarantine, we would anticipate that being really like 5 school days in that 8-day window, something like that. And so we're thinking through the possibilities of quarantine also being less likely. What was 6 feet last year is now, if we have 2 mask parties, 3 feet, and we are affording that within the classroom as well. So by asking for the mask mandate up front, we're setting ourselves up for success in terms of ensuring that our students are able to continue to participate within the classes. And we want them, I know we keep saying it, but we want them here 5 days a week with us, able to learn. And this is the best way to guarantee that and to not put families in a position where they're then trying to arrange childcare and things like that on the outset. So in addition to that, we haven't really mentioned much, but there are not current travel guidelines other than international travel, and that is based through the United States, actually monitoring that on their own with attestation forms and so forth, requiring testing on the way in. So we anticipate that being similar. With recess, we're not asking students to mask. It'll be optional when they're outdoors in that environment. We see that being a benefit, as well as the ability, like we said, to have lunch outdoors, mask breaks, et cetera. So we're excited to have a little bit more normalcy as we return to this year with this added protection as we monitor for this first period of the year in the beginning as well.
Are there questions from the board, especially clarifying questions?
So I do have questions about with the if a student is if we okay, I'm sorry. I was trying to pose this question. We're asking families to share vaccination status of their students with us. Will there be, or will we ask for, I won't say a deadline, but is it preferred earlier in the school year? Would you like to have it within the next month? I understand that it may happen over time, but is it as soon as they get it? The reason for asking that is if there are more students who are vaccinated, and we know that percentage, will that influence over time if the transmission rate goes down? Will that also influence the masking requirement within the school?
I absolutely think that's beneficial if families are able to share that information with us. We know from our survey that people are willing, for the most part, to share that status, and I've asked, and we'll be setting an update for the Health Services Department this week, that if families are willing to do that, they can contact their school nurse and we'll update the student information system, because as you mentioned, having that data locally really helps inform our decisions and gives us more confidence in what will likely be a transmission rate or not among those, hopefully, who are more on the vaccinated side of the population. So I encourage families to submit that if they are willing to do so.
And will students have to quarantine if they are vaccinated? If they are?
There are multiple scenarios in that, but if you're vaccinated, essentially you do not, as long as you remain asymptomatic. You would, however, have to wear a mask for a period of time, and our school nurses would work through that process with everyone. We are working on a flow chart because you could have unmasked versus masked, unvaccinated versus vaccinated, any combination thereof of individuals within a room. So when we are looking at that contact tracing process, we're going to need to be able to look at those right around within the 3 feet, and if one party is masked but one is not, the unmasked person would need to quarantine unless they are, of course, vaccinated, in which case they would become masked, et cetera. So we're going to have scenarios to share with folks so that becomes a little more clear.
Okay.
Understanding that it's extremely confusing.
And just like last year, with all of that, when it comes to contact tracing, we're really supporting the Allegheny County Health Department. We share the information with them, and they're the ones that make those determinations. So we are support to that process, but that's not like our process.
Okay.
We can set up the mitigation to make it the best for continuity, and so that's what we can control. But we work with the county health department officials.
And then if students are quarantined and they have to be out for this 8-day, 10-day, depending on if they get tested or not, what happens with their instruction? Let's put it that way, if it's not even an individual student, what if we did have to close a classroom down, or a building? What would happen with instruction at that point?
So I think you bring up like 3 very different scenarios, at least in my mind. So if it's one child and we
Dr.
have
Justice, could you, I'm having a hard time hearing.
Oh,
Maybe
absolutely.
bring the mic up and, yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's going to be some feedback, so we might have
Okay,
to slow down a little too.
Absolutely. So I was saying that there are like 3 different scenarios within that you mentioned. In my mind, they're very different. So if it's one child within a classroom, which we hope that we're setting the rows and columns up in a way that there shouldn't be transmission as long as parties are either vaccinated or masked. Within that, we would ask those students to be completing the work while they're in their quarantine period. And I believe the mic is lost. Maybe not. And if they do so, then they would be marked present for that time period. So they will not be considered absent so long as the work is coming in and they are staying on top of things. And that would be for about that 5-day period. In our minds, that's akin to someone taking a vacation or a trip. They typically collect the work. We have Blackboard and Google Classroom where we are making the work more accessible now in terms of the classroom and the structure that's there. If an entire classroom were to quarantine, I think we would need to take a look at that. We don't know if that would include the teacher or not, but I believe that we would need to look at that differently than an individual student situation. So those are things that we'll work through as we get there, but again, we're setting it up in such a way that we are hopeful that that will not come to be, because it did not happen last year as frequently, and we were in a fully different situation. So I think we're better positioned this year to guard ourselves against quarantine in that manner.
And I'd add to that, Chris, that last year, we were structured in a way in terms of preparing for daily instruction for the hybrid approach, where some students were online and some were in person. This year, as a teacher, as you prepare for your learning activities and your focus is on in-person learning, it's a different instructional approach, so they have to think about that differently. So that's a pretty significant impact on delivery when we start modifying that approach. So that was the reason why we believe it's, again, quarantine numbers hopefully will be very much down because of the mitigation efforts and the vaccinations that are available, at least in the secondary level, and then allows the students still to get access to their learning through the means that they've become accustomed, which are Google Classroom and Blackboard, and but do that asynchronous at home, without the live connection that they were experiencing last year.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Mihalik, you had a question?
No, I think that's pretty thorough, so thanks.
And Peter, just to be clear, you're asking for questions, not deliberation, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Trying to draw that if we can, yeah. So just to follow up on the athletics, because it might have just gone by a little fast. So outdoor, which is 90% of our fall sports, masking is not required under this plan. Indoor, that's one sport, girls volleyball. Practice and competition where you're actively engaged. So just to clarify, so competition was the word that was first used, but if you're playing.
Yeah. So,
I can
what's that?
I can take it. It's up to you, whatever you want.
I'll say this. So outside, for the players, unless they're in an indoor space, like let's say they're using a locker room as a changing space, be masked in that location, but once they're out participating, they're participating without a mask. If someone wants to wear one, they can always have that ability to do that. So, for an individual athlete can make that decision for him or herself. Again, spectators, same thing, we're in an outdoor environment, so let's say we're having a soccer game, it's up to parents what it is that they want to do, or spectators who come to the game to watch that. Indoor, so right now it's in season, it would be volleyball, but we will have other sports that are probably doing off-season work. While they're in there working, they would be unmasked, not required to wear a mask during their physical activity, playing whatever it is that they're doing. We would ask the coaches to, instead of having a tight huddle, if you're going to talk to the players about something, keep kids spread. There's no reason to do that. Keep their water bottle spread, stuff like that. But the masks would be optional. They would not be required for the participants. If there was a home volleyball match or a basketball game or something like that, at this time, we would ask that spectators be masked while they're there, indoors.
Can you talk a little bit more? I know, Christine, your question got to it, but Dr. Miller, can you talk a little bit more about why we can't just sort of have this, as part of the education delivery, that hybrid of Johnny's home sick, turn on the screen, you're good to go, isn't really there this year. And we touched on it, but not enough for me. I don't really, I'm not there yet. It does feel like a half a step backward from where we were. Is it because we don't anticipate the need? Is it, I just think I'm trying to understand that part a little bit better.
Yeah, so every school year in this last period of time has been different. So we had the spring of 20, we were reacting and responding. We had a certain set of conditions. When we went into 2021, again, with what we knew at the time, we designed a hybrid model, and we're primarily talking about secondary. That's where this tends to be more of a factor. But we designed a hybrid where we knew with 100% certainty there would be online learners every day. So teachers understood that every other day, as students are switching A to K and L to Z in terms of the alphabet, the entire instructional delivery was designed around that fact. So all of the planning and preparation, the turning on of the camera, the design of learning activities for students to participate, everything about that was in that design. And so that allowed students, again, to come in and out of the in-person learning environment and have as much continuity as possible. It is not a simple instructional task to do that well. Our focus, so that was last year. And I think people would say, you know, some did fine, some really struggled. I'm talking about students. Some teachers did extremely well, and some were challenged significantly by that. We learned a whole lot from those experiences. And what we learned and understand is that 21, 22 is a different time period. That the top line goal of all of our staff and families is to get kids back in person every day. And so teachers will design their instructional lessons for that in-person learning environment, which means maximizing the manner in which they do that. Whereas last year, there was a whole lot of planning, preparation, and delivery into that alternate day hybrid. This year, you never know when it could be. So it's almost like you could find out in the morning you have something that occurs with a particular student who's on a different schedule, and you're trying to do that across all of your preparations in order to deliver that effectively, and that's not simple to do well. What we believe occurred in terms of our learning last year at the secondary level that will continue is teachers have augmented how they use Blackboard or Google Classroom as a resource for materials, assignments, activities, lessons, etc. And so we believe that for a student who's at home, while they're not in the live stream, they have access to high quality materials and they have the ability to return to that classroom. If they're sick, they shouldn't be doing anything. I mean, they're sick, you're sick. You're not expected to go through school when you're sick. But if you're quarantined, then there are online activities for you to participate in, but the teacher's focus will remain solidly on in-person learning for the students in the classroom and interacting with those individuals who need it. So again, that's where our thinking is, and that's again, our recommendation to start the year with face coverings is because if we do so while we're in high transmission, while we're seeing, again, increasing cases, and given the public health guidance that is out there, it is our hope that we do not have many cases of quarantine. That's our hope. And there's not a reason, if we follow this, that we can't be in that space. And that puts the students back in school every day, which is our top priority.
Yeah, and I just add that I think we have to think about course content and delivery. I think you can argue some courses are a little more conducive to a flexible shift, but if you think of like a robotics course or a family consumer science course, you know, the ability to make a quick shift based upon a student that you find out is absent that day and be able to modify to online, or students that you heard about the day before that are going to be quarantined, those are all things that are just significant challenges for those courses that are built around the in-person learner. Again, last year, knowing there was going to be the split, the activities were built knowing that, and they could do that in advance.
It sort of goes without saying, but the K-6 level, really 1 through 6, since they have a fully virtual model separate from in-person, there isn't a time where there is a child who would be virtual and coming into the classroom, so that doesn't exist at all in the primary, and typically they're not working off of, you know, Google Meets. Google Classroom they've started to use a little more just to post assignments and streamline things, at that level, and we'll be able to maintain that as something that we learned and gained from this past several months of experience. But those two worlds really do live separately at that younger level.
Do we have any other questions from the board this time? Seeing how there's none, we will move to our recognition of visitors. Prior to that, we will ask our solicitor to read a statement of our policy. As a reminder, we have both online and in-person speakers tonight. Is that correct, Ms. Williams? Let's go in person first,
Okay,
if we could tonight.
sure.
There were sign-up sheets at the rear. There is still a sign-up sheet to speak at the conclusion of the meeting that will be available until we reach that part of our agenda. Mr. Palmer.
As is our custom, we make reference to Board Policy 903, which addresses public participation in board meetings. The board recognizes the value to school governance of public comment on educational issues and the importance of involving members of the public in board meetings. The board also recognizes its responsibility for proper governance of the district and the need to conduct its business in an orderly and efficient manner. To that end, anyone who wishes to speak must be recognized by the presiding officer and must preference their comments by stating their name and address. Each statement made by a participant shall be limited to 3 minutes in duration. The portion of the meeting during which the public is invited to speak may be limited to 60 minutes as necessary. All statements shall be directed to the presiding officer, and the presiding officer may interrupt or terminate a participant's statement when the statement is too lengthy, abusive, obscene, or irrelevant. The presiding officer may request any individual to leave the meeting when that person does not observe reasonable decorum, may request the assistance of law enforcement officers to remove a disorderly person when his or her conduct interferes with the orderly progress of the meeting, and may call a recess to adjourn to another time when the lack of public decorum interferes with the orderly conduct of the meeting.
Right, our first speaker tonight is Christina Avalon.
Good evening. This past weekend I was visiting friends in the South Hills, and at one point during the evening someone asked what's going on with Pine-Richland. Seems like they're always in the news. I was saddened by the statement because it's the district that my girls went to and I live in. Once my last daughter graduated, I thought I was done with school board meetings. But then I realized I needed to take a stand for what is right. In 2020, we didn't know what we didn't know, but we do now. It's time to do what is right. Coronavirus is the common cold, and they are saying it's not going anywhere. Does that mean students will be masked forever, since this virus will always be with us? None of us can negate that there are vast debates amongst various scholars on the effectiveness of masks, transmission, vaccines, and the list goes on. However, they all agree the harmful effects of prolonged mask wearing, especially amongst school-aged children, is horrible. We can all list statistics in favor of our own opinion, but I must ask, where is our common sense gone? We never masked our children during cough and cold season in the past. Why are we, as a nation, living in fear? Courage is not the absence of fear, it's taking a stand for what is right in the midst of fear. The blanket of fear has fallen our nation. Stealing, killing, and destroying relationships. Logic has flown out the window for fear-based solutions. The infection rate for children ages 5 to 9 is less than 0.001%, according to one source, and yet children are still being the ones harmed with masks. Why am I concerned? We now know the harmful effects of masks. I realize we didn't know, but that's not true anymore. The harmful effects of wearing masks and their potential health consequences are as follows. The physiological effects: hypoxemia, inadequate oxygenation of the blood; hypercapnia, excess carbon dioxide in the blood; shortness of breath; decline in pH level; acidosis; inflammation; self-contamination; increase in stress hormones; increase in muscle tension. Physiological effects: activation of fight, flight, stress; chronic stress condition, fear, mood disturbances, insomnia, fatigue, compromised cognitive performance. Health consequences: increased predisposition for viral infection and illness; headaches, anxiety, depression, hypertension, cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes; exasperation of existing conditions and diseases; health deterioration, premature mortality. Now is time to rethink COVID safety protocols for children. Fear has been masquerading as reason, but we now know to take the masks off students. Do you live in a spirit of fear? I do not live in a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. I wonder, when you go to bed, do you sleep soundly knowing what you're doing for the children is right? Please
Ms.
hear my
Evelyn,
heart.
that's 3 minutes, if you could wind up.
I'm finishing
Thank you.
right here. Please hear my heart. I know your attention last year was to protect the students the best way we knew how, but the harmful effects of masking students all day long is now known. I pray you boldly take a stand and do what is right for the students. Let them go to school mask-free. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Susan Torsha.
Good evening. My name is Susan Torsha, and I'm the president of the PRESPA and a secretary at the high school. I am here tonight to encourage the school board to support the recommendation of the Healthcare Leadership Council to begin the school year requiring masks for staff and students while indoors. This recommendation gives our school district the best opportunity to maintain in-person learning with the least disruption. Based on the results of the staff survey, a majority of our staff, 87%, has indicated that they are planning and or willing to wear a mask. When the class of 2021 graduated outdoors at the stadium, none of us thought that this scenario would be our reality. I have confidence that as the situation evolves, you as the school board will continue to follow the updates and recommendations by physicians and medical experts to modify the plan to fit the circumstances as they warrant. We are excited to welcome back all Rams at each and every building. This will get us to as close to normal as we can be at this time. I want to thank you for keeping the health and safety of staff and students as the primary reason for voting to support this recommendation. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Chris Bruff.
Good evening. Actually, it's brow, just like an eyebrow. I tell my students that. 2 points for being here tonight. First of all, my point of view on the whole mask thing, I think it should be up to the parents, providing if I should let my children wear a mask or not. I think it should be my choice. Just wanted to note on that. But my main reason is being here, I got this in the mail the other day, the annual report, and I'm just here to request how much this costs to produce. I did a quick search. There's about 22,000 people in Richland and Pine Township. I'm assuming everybody got one because it says the residents, and just curious how much. I'd like to request that information to know how much we're spending on this. I think I saw in the board documents you're paperless. I don't see why this document couldn't easily be put on the website to download if you wanted it. I'm not sure how many of these get looked at, how many of these get pitched. I'm proud of it, and my daughter's in it, but I still think from a cost standpoint, this could easily be done. So I'm requesting to know how much this costs to make and to mail out and to produce. So I don't know how I can give you my email address. If you could share that with me, I think it's important at the time of costs and everything that's being spent. I think there's ways that we can limit what we're spending, and I think this is a nice way. I know it's good to get out there, but a lot of people go online, and I think that would be an easier way, a more economical way to share the information. A lot of good stuff in here, but I think there's another way, more fiscally wise way to share it with the public here in Pine-Richland. Thank you. Now, how would I get that information? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Bra, I have your email right here on the sign-up sheet.
Yes,
So we
if you
can
can share that with her, that would be awesome.
We
Thank
will.
you.
Our next speaker is Mr. Mark Gentili.
Hello, thank you for allowing me to speak. I've lived here for 14 years. I have two daughters. One's in high school and one's in middle school. I also volunteer as the president of the Pine-Richland Girls Lacrosse Boosters. When I moved back here 14 years ago from Washington, D.C., I decided to settle in Pine-Richland. I graduated from Upper St. Clair High School, and I saw a lot of parallels between that district and Pine-Richland. Both large but not a mega school, tremendous school spirit, great facilities, great academic reputation. But the most important thing, I knew that the people of Pine-Richland would be successful overachievers. I believed that their habits, work ethic, and values would permeate through the entire community. All in all, I believed that my kids would be attending the school filled with the best of the best, from the students to the teachers to the administrators to the school board. I still believe in the people of this community. I love my kids' teachers, and I love my kids' coaches. But sadly, there are several indicators that the leadership of this district, from the senior administration to the school board, are not up to the standards that I envisioned when I moved here. Let's look at a couple of the instances from the last 12 months. Number one, several school board meetings have become a rally and/or a circus, to put it kindly, including this one. It was a rally outside. I don't know any other school district that has repeated rallies at their school board meetings. Number two, the handling of the entire Eric Kasparovich situation was nothing short of a complete and total embarrassment. And I don't have kids who play football. The months-long attention, negative attention, mayhem, and chaos in this district following the firing of Mr. Kasparovich are the direct result of 8 years of poor leadership, poor management, and poor decision-making by everyone in charge. Number three, once again, for the third time in 4 years, we don't have an athletic director. Athletic director has left. The guy who just left wasn't even qualified for the job, which means he was probably being overpaid. Who leaves a job when they're being overpaid? No one. Number four, an assistant principal just left. Number five, we're currently holding a several-year academic losing streak in publications such as the Pittsburgh Business Times, U.S. News and World Report, and Niche.com against the North Alleghenies and the Upper St. Clairs of the world. We are never ranked at the top of the academic food chain, ever. We're always ranked as a pretty good academic school. Number six, you've once again failed to listen to the wishes of 2/3 of the parents of the middle school and high school who said they don't want their kids wearing a mask. And I know you're gonna add that the yeses and the well maybes, but that was a trick question. Everyone knows that.
If you go on down, that's been 3 minutes, Mr. Gentili.
Yes, I'm almost done. In closing, as a tax-paying resident of this district who has worked my tail off to be able to afford to live here, I would like to say to all of you, start doing a better job. This has gotten out of control. I think I speak for a lot of people when I say that the patience with your performance has worn very, very thin. We all expect, deserve, and are paying for better than what you are providing. Thank
Our next speaker is Chris Vins.
Good evening. My name is Chris Vins. I'm a third grade teacher at Wexford Elementary School, and I'm the president of the Pine-Richland Education Association, or the PREA. Thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. I am speaking in support of the recommended health and safety plan. Student and staff safety has always been a priority of our association. The recommended plan provides the best opportunity for in-person learning while keeping all of us safe. It is also flexible and allows for modifying mask requirements as conditions and/or guidance change. I know our members are not thrilled about beginning the year wearing masks. However, I am confident they are far less enthusiastic about returning to the scenario we faced last year, which provided tremendous challenges for everyone. The recommended health and safety plan gives us the best opportunity for a full year of in-person learning while maintaining student and staff safety. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Victoria Hall.
Hello, my name is Victoria Hall, and I am here to say I can't breathe. We heard people protesting, rioting over a man who died because he couldn't breathe. What about our children? Our children are having horrible times. The impact to children in wearing masks causes them to have headaches, causes their teeth to rot. It causes them to not be able to concentrate. It causes them to not be able to interpret facial expressions and social cues. It causes them to have issues in the classroom because they can't hear or understand their teachers because they can't see what they're saying. Children are not being impacted by this. A total of 349 children have died with COVID, not from COVID, with COVID. Over 800 have died from pneumonia. It's per the CDC on their website as of August 4th. I saw people shaking their heads about my first statement. But we as parents, we need to stand up and we need to protect our children. The other information that other doctors, the other people that have difference of opinions than Allegheny County and all of the Dr. Fauci's out there, they're censored, they're banned. And it's very difficult to find that information. But if you're intelligent and you persevere, you can find it. Our children need to breathe. They need to see. If they wear glasses, they're sitting through a foggy screen all day. How is that good? Our children also are now afraid. We will have a horrible generation coming up that will have to actually have mental institutions again because they have been taught to fear. They have been taught that people are bad if they don't wear a mask, if they don't get an emergency use authorization that has no long-term studies. We don't know what this is going to do to people, and we definitely don't know what it's going to do to our children. But right now, the science says it doesn't harm them. They need to be unmasked.
Our next speaker is Tom Baxter.
Hi, I'm Tom Baxter of Pine Township and Prosper Now. I first want to correct the district again. There is no personal litigation against the district regarding sexual violence. The district has been under federal investigation for more than a year by the Department of Education for 4 violations of civil rights laws that protect students from sexual violence and racial harassment. As reported 2 weeks ago, numerous families have informed our organization of sexual assaults on school property that reveal a pattern that the district trivializes sexual assault, intimidates students from coming forward, and retaliates against them if they do. In the last school board meeting, the district publicly confirmed its dismissive attitude towards sexual assault and its survivors when they attempted to silence a survivor trying to speak. Anna Baxter and those who followed that night refused to be intimidated, and they spoke. The many other voices will be heard in the many forthcoming investigations that we detail on the Prosper Now Facebook page. I want to clarify an incident that was mentioned 2 weeks ago. Recall that in March of 2016, under this administration, the coach of the Pine-Richland girls varsity, JV, and 8th grade girls basketball team pleaded guilty to 2 felonies for having an ongoing sexual relationship with a 16-year-old Pine-Richland student for at least 6 months. He was sent to prison and is now a lifetime registered sex offender. We have been informed by a former board member that this district knew of those allegations of this relationship for 2 months and did nothing. This district did not contact the police, Childline, or the girl's parents. Yet the day after the arrest, the district stated to the media that it, quote, became aware of the allegations the same day as police. And Superintendent Brian Miller stated to the media, quote, the district is shocked by the nature of the allegations. We strongly value the importance of ethical behavior and the responsibility of working with young people. Please see Chapter 64 of the PA Child Protective Services Law regarding mandated reporters. First, in addition to all educators, a district's legal counsels and all board members are also mandated reporters. Second, mandated reporters must personally immediately report directly to Childline. They cannot simply notify a supervisor. Third, under Section 6319 of that law, a mandated reporter not reporting to Childline is a crime. And that law states that the failure to report of a continuing course of action, as in this case, is a 3rd-degree felony, which in Pennsylvania carries a 3.5 to 7-year prison term. To the board directors, I ask, do you choose to personally stand with an institution that trivializes, that's not 3 minutes, that trivializes sexual assault and marginalizes its victims? Or do you instead to choose to convey your personal stance against sexual assault and support survivors? Your actions will reveal your decisions. Again, I say, Drs. Miller and Pasquinelli, submit your resignations. Board directors, if they do not, conduct a hearing and take a majority vote to remove them. Finally, all board directors except Ms. Hayden, submit your resignations by August 31st so that this community can begin to heal and chart a new path forward. If you do not, we will initiate the processes that we are extremely confident that will remove you all forcibly. Thank you.
While we do not typically engage in a back and forth or question and answer, when we do hear statements of concern or inaccurate information, we do like to interject at this time. I'd ask our solicitor to address some of those allegations that Mr. Baxter expressed.
I would state for the record that the district board and administration stand with victims of sexual assault, treat allegations of sexual assault seriously, and urge any victims of such assaults to report those incidents through the proper channels so that all claims may be investigated as the law requires. No one who believes that they have been victimized in any way should go unheard, and we encourage those who have a concern to report to the proper authorities. Title IX information, including the complaint process, is posted on the district's website Annual notifications are shared with students, staff, and families. We encourage anyone in the Pine-Richland community to share an appropriate report by following the steps outlined on that site. As another option, the state developed Safe to Say, something anonymous reporting tool can be used to submit a report. Finally, we encourage families to share information directly with a school counselor or principal. Such sharing is absolutely vital to the overall health and safety of our students, families, and community. Throughout these processes, the district is committed to protecting privacy and confidentiality when possible. Allegations of sexual assault, a crime, should also be reported to the Northern Regional Police Department. The Northern Regional Police Department tip line is 724-449-8477. While a public forum is not the appropriate place to discuss particular cases, the district vigorously investigates all allegations of sexual assault or sexual harassment that it receives, involves the Northern Regional Police Department and other appropriate authorities where necessary, and takes appropriate action based on the results of the investigation. Matters that have been referenced in this public forum, I can say, have been reported to law enforcement. Law enforcement has involved, and appropriate steps have been taken. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. I wanted to also address, you brought up Mrs. Oland, and I wanted to, since that's now the second time it's been made public, make everyone also aware that our solicitor is reaching out to Ms. Oland. The allegations that you repeated here were made in a tape recording. There is no documentation substantiation. 3 of us at this table served with Mrs. Oland on the board. That was 5-6 years ago. No such information was shared with this board at that time. We would like Mrs. Oland to come forward, contact our solicitor, and respond to our request for more information because it is baffling to us how someone who sat in this chair could have failed to report those allegations, if true, at that time.
And Mr. President, I'd note that we've already initiated that reach out.
Thank you. Ms. Williams.
Our next speaker is Donald Sank.
Hello. I'm Donald Sank. I'm a practicing chiropractor in the Fox Chapel area. 7 years ago, I moved my family to Pine-Richland because I saw a school district that I thought was an up-and-coming school district. I'm disappointed that you're following the herd instead of setting yourselves apart again. Because following the herd is going to make you like lemmings go off the cliff for the rest of them. There is no scientific evidence to date that decides in any way, shape, or form and demonstrates that masking is effective for children, much less adults. But with children, we're talking about a substantial problem in the fact that it is increasing the amount of CO2 that they're breathing on a daily basis, and it's decreasing their oxygen concentration. Now, it was submitted to the Fox Chapel High School only last week, and I submitted it to Ms. Hathorn. An independent study done about the oxygen concentration and CO2 concentrations, and at both levels, the oxygen behind the mask for children and adults and the CO2 behind the mask for children and adults is below OSHA safe levels. So the oxygen's below and the CO2 is above in parts per million. I can't emphasize to you enough, I understand the fear that embraces you right now, that holds you hostage, that you need to do something, if anything, to get back to in-person schooling. My children will not be in the school on day 1 simply because of the masks. I will protect them at all costs. And I will protect them against nonsense like masking of children, where most of our children, young enough children, don't even possess the ACE2 receptors that will pick up the virus in their nasal passages and their sinuses. This is beyond ridiculous. This has now become a political and a moral issue instead of a policy issue. And that's unfortunate because I moved to this school district because I thought the school district had something extra. I grew up in the Fox Chapel area, and I had a good school district then and good superintendents, and I realized that something left there at one point in time. I came to this school district for something different, and I've found in what has gone on with COVID-19 and what has gone on also in the last couple of years with the constant discourse that's gone on at this school district, that I may have been erroneous in my assumptions that this was the place to move my children. I'm hoping that there's going to be a quick change in what goes on with masking, because children are not the spreaders in this. This is not something where children are the main source of the pathogen. Children and those individuals 70 years and younger have 1/1000th the chance of transmitting it compared to somebody above 70 years of age. The average age of death in the state of Pennsylvania is 81 years of age. This is unconscionable that we're doing this to our children, because it is going to change their cognitive function for life. Not just now, not just next year, but we're going to start seeing the diminishing test scores over the next several years. And that's why I moved to this school, because I thought this school district had something different. So I asked the board members to consider that when you're going along with the herd on this one, the herd's taking you off the cliff. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Beth Smallwood.
I would like you to pretend for the next few minutes, all of you, that your daughters go to Pine-Richland High School. Not NA, to Pine-Richland High School. Think about that. 2 weeks ago, you find out that your older daughter was on a team with a man who was sleeping with one of the students there. And you find out that your daughter was under his care for 2 months before the parents knew. And now we find out that there is an alleged rapist walking the hallways of our high school, and your younger daughter now goes to that high school as well. I care about masks, and by the way, not wearing them, but I feel like there's bigger fish to fry here. I am worried about my kids' safety. And supposedly that person has assaulted other kids, other girls since. I don't know what is more important than our children's safety going to school. And maybe this isn't the right forum, but I would like you all to tell me what is the right forum, when and where, because I'll bet you there's other people here that would like to be a part of that forum. So that's my question. When and where can we all talk about this? Because people are scared. I look forward to your answer.
Our next speaker is John Corey.
Hi, I'm John Corey. I live at 306 North Wind Court. Last time we were in this auditorium, I came up and spoke about process. At that time, we were talking about the process of firing a successful coach. The investigation of what we learned about it at that time wasn't corroborated. And again, I'm back here talking about process. Tonight, I'm talking to you about the process where last board meeting I sat through, you interrupted a rape victim. And then tonight, you send an email before this board meeting talking about how much you value student safety. Do you understand how that comes across to this community? Do you understand that? No one trusts you. When you interrupt a rape victim in that scenario and then you send an email out talking about how much you value student safety, it doesn't work. It doesn't. That process is broken. The process where you interrupt anybody who stands up here and says things that you don't like, you interrupt. She had every right to stand up here and tell her story, and she was brave for doing it. She was crying outside on the way in that day, and you interrupted her. And none of you said a word to the solicitor doing that. The solicitor we pay out of our tax dollars. None of that is okay. When I first addressed this board 4 or 5 years ago, there was a process in place where you didn't speak to whoever addressed us. You had to send a email communication with questions. And then suddenly, in the last 4 or 5 months, Peter, you speak to whoever you choose to speak to. Have your rules changed? Is it different now? Follow the process you guys have in place. Also, you claim to be an open book, and you love talking about how open you are as a group. Then why aren't the DEI and the Health Council meetings open? There's no reason in the world that those aren't at least taped so we can watch them. You want us to understand more about the decision-making that goes on? Then tape them. If they're creating policy or giving you guys counsel on what choices you're gonna make, why aren't those meetings open and why aren't those meetings taped? One or the other. They should be. And the last thing is the process that we're headed down a road where we're gonna look for our 4th AD in 4 years. Doesn't make a lot of sense, guys. You know, and I listened to Mark come up here and talk about, you know, choosing this district. I was in the exact same boat. I chose this district because I wanted the best for my children. And now I'm concerned about my children's safety. I implore you to do better than you're doing. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Matt Simmons.
Hello, board members. My name is Matt Simmons. I'm a community member, local business owner, and I have 2 kids that go to Pine-Richland School District. And first, I'd be remiss to say if I didn't call out what I feel is the optics of the masks up on stage. I guess our solicitor can't get COVID when he's speaking because he pulls his mask down but then puts it back up. You and the school board this year have decided that our kids should go to school every single day wearing muzzles like they're rabid dogs. I've listened to your arguments, and I've noticed that they're missing a few things, but namely evidence relating to our kids. Data, science, common sense, and basic human decency. Our kids are ages 0 through 17. Now you have to forgive me, my ex-wife didn't include me in the questionnaire that went out. I would have answered it differently than she had done. You state 76% were planning to or willing to wear masks. 2 completely different things, but you combine them to make it look like a higher percentage. What was the breakdown, I ask you? What was the breakdown for those that were willing to if they absolutely had to versus those that were planning to? Let's get into some details here. COVID poses almost 0 risk to our kids at all. 4.2 million children tested positive in the last year and a half. 354 as of the 11th have passed away. And yes, any death from any disease, whether adult or children, is absolutely horrible. That represents a 0.008% that have passed. Think about that. 0.008%. With that said, let's not forget the main cause of death, and it's not COVID most of the time, it's underlying comorbidities. What about the flu, which between the 2018 and 2019 season, 4 or 5 months or so, 480 kids have died from the regular flu, with vaccinations available. That's more than have died from COVID in a year and a half. A year and a half. Not anyone on this board during the 2018-2019 season recommended that our kids wear masks for the flu. Not any parent in here during the 2018-2019 flu season recommended our kids wear masks. But yet we are now recommending or mandating or requiring our kids to wear masks for a disease that is far less deadly or even transmissible to kids aged 0 through 17. You know what that's called? It's called child abuse. We're forcing these things on our kids. They're coming home with headaches. They're coming home with all kinds of issues because you are forcing our kids to wear these. Look up Munchausen by proxy. Please. That's exactly what you guys are doing to our kids. Do you think I'm exaggerating? I want you to think about this. A parent forces his kid to wear a football helmet all day, every day, in fear of a falling rock from the sky. How would you look at that parent? You would look at them like they're insane. Yet that's exactly what you're doing when it comes to this so-called pandemic and virus, by forcing these masks on our kids. Do you know what kind of psychological damage you're doing to these kids by forcing them to wear their faces, teaching them that the air is toxic, everyone around them is sick? And have you wondered about the health effects of forcing kids to breathe through sweat, spit, dirt-soaked rags every single day? What about learning to read? They can't see their teachers enunciate certain words. Why are we even ignoring Biden's own top epidemiologist advisor, who no more than 2 weeks ago came on CNN and told the world, we now know masks don't work? We're gonna ignore that? What does it do to a child's developing immune system that has to wear this all day long? Are you guys willing to be held accountable when certain diseases and issues pop up in the future? I bet you won't. You're satisfied to place burdens on children who are the most innocent. And it's not to keep them safe, and it's not to keep the adults safe. You can choose to be vaccinated. Our kids can't. No, you do it to make yourself feel better, protect yourself politically. The child's mask is nothing but a safety blanket for you, not them. We as parents should have the freedom of choice, utilizing informed consent. I thank you for your time.
That was our last in-person speaker. We have one speaker on the line. Mr. Stovner, if you're able. Mrs. Judy Masucci.
We can give Mr. Stovner a moment.
Yeah.
Ms. Masucci, if you're online, just stand by for a second.
Hello?
Hello, Mrs. Masucci.
Yes.
You're on with the board.
My name is Judy Masucci. I live at 613 Trillium Court. I just wanted to call in tonight to voice my support for masking of our students in the school. I do want to be able to obtain as much in-person instruction as possible during the school year, and I do think it's important to curb the spread of COVID-19 to keep our students masked. I'm hoping, just as all of you are, that we'll be able to ease the mask restrictions as the numbers go down again. But right now, Allegheny County is in the high risk category for transmission, and both the CDC, the AAP, and the Allegheny Health Department are recommending masking indoors for students. I would, however, like to ask that you reconsider the virtual learning for those who are in quarantine. I do think it's going to be very difficult for students to stay up if they have to quarantine for 5, 7, 10, 14 days, whatever it is. I think it's going to be very difficult for them to keep up without the virtual learning option. So I would encourage the streaming to be reinstated, especially if we see that, that we have a lot of kids in quarantine. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Correspondence.
The following people emailed the board: Ken Juarez regarding student safety. The following people emailed the board regarding mask guidance: Julie Wojcik, Kelly Voigt, Kimberly Watton, Gina O'Malley, Laura Potosky, Dawn Augustine, Nicole Cuglieri, Leslie Miller, Lisa DiTullio, Carrie Wynn, Rich Seagraves, Christy Wees, Ellen Seagraves, Emily Stewart, Tracy and Jason Moore, Ashley DeChellis, and Matthew Simmons.
Thank you. Student and staff recognition, Ms. Hathorn.
Thank you. Pine-Richland would like to recognize Margaret Tynes for her 15 years of service through the district. She served as a mathematics teacher at the high school. While she's unable to join us tonight, we wanted to indicate our appreciation of her dedication in serving the students of Pine-Richland. Pine-Richland High School junior Ayla Shandola was named the grand prize winner in the 17th Congressional District of Pennsylvania's 2021 art competition. She earned accolades for her computer-generated and mixed media artwork, which was entitled Nature's Power. She will participate in a recognition ceremony to honor all the competition winners. Ayla participated in the project under the direction of Pine-Richland High School teacher Ramon Riley. Pine-Richland is honoring National Merit Scholars via an interactive kiosk situated in the hallway of Pine-Richland Central offices. The kiosk features National Merit recipients by year and images of the awardees through the years. A big thank you to communications intern Brandon Pierce, a 2019 Pine-Richland High School graduate who helped with the project. As teams are looking forward to fall athletics, we have some students who earned additional recognition over the summer. Senior Riley Wollerton was invited to attend the RISE selection camp, which is part of the USA Field Hockey Olympic Development Program. In addition, she participated in the Nexus Championships for field hockey and was selected to play in the Stars and Stripes Elite Game. Only 55 athletes from across the country are invited to this prestigious camp to train for future events hosted by USA Field Hockey. Class of 2021 graduate Hallie Albrecht was an All-American in girls lacrosse. Haley was one of 7 athletes selected to earn this award from Western Pennsylvania. Class of 2021 graduate Danielle Bryant was one of 10 female recipients to receive the 2021 Whippeal James Collins Scholar Athlete Award. During her time on the high school and track and field team, Danielle earned several accolades and awards and even holds 4 different Pine-Richland High School records. Junior Catherine Yanni was named a 2021 Amateur Athletic Union Volleyball Academic All-American Award recipient. Catherine was one of 39 athletes selected from Pennsylvania for this prestigious award. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That is always a wonderful litany to hear. Item 1.06 is an action item, a motion to approve the meeting minutes as attached for the August 2nd joint governance meeting and the board planning meeting.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say yes.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Item 2.01, as indicated earlier, is an action item, a motion to approve the health and safety plan as presented earlier tonight.
Second.
The motion's been made and seconded. It may be deliberated by the board at this time.
So I would kindly ask my colleagues on the board to vote against this plan. It seems like we're treating this decision like we did pre-vaccine. The vaccine changed the game. And we don't have to start the year with a requirement on masks. I think we should leave it optional. And I think we should put the decision in the hands of responsible parents. My 14-year-old daughter, Jara, was very excited about starting school this year until last Friday, when she heard the scuttlebutt with all her friends on TikTok about the email that went out. The way I look at it, we've had a vaccine, and let's just table 11 and under for right now. But 12 and over, anyone 12 and over has been able to get a vaccine if they want it, and if they didn't get it. Therefore, they've accepted the risk of existing, of living without a vaccine. That's their choice. Without the vaccine, for me, last year was different because it was really about others. Without a vaccine, it forced me, and all of us really, to think about others first, over ourselves. This year's different because we've now had the decision in front of us to get the vaccine or not. We're overthinking this right now. We're overthinking this. And we're letting fear dictate our decision. We said in our public section that other considerations is that we don't want politics to interfere with establishing a positive culture. We're actually making this political by requiring masks. We even state, while direct risk of hospitalization and death for children is low. It's the flu. We can treat this like the flu. I do appeal to each and every one of your hearts on the board. I'm otherwise fine with the plan. I would like to see us just tweak it to start the school year to make masks optional, not required. So I will be voting against it as it stands right now.
Dr. Mihalik.
Thanks. With all due respect, vaccine is not an option for all of our students. There are a large number of students who do not have that as an option. And they have to live with risks that others would put upon them. And that is something that I don't think is fair, especially because they're young children. The data does show with the COVID, the Delta variant, that it is more infectious with young children, and it has longer lingering effects under long COVID, which no one really knows what those long-term symptoms are going to be. So out of a sense of precaution and care of our youngest members, I think requiring masks to start the school year makes a lot of sense. It aligns with all of the recommendations of public health professionals, which, if there's politicization in any of this, it's people who take the recommendations of experts and somehow try to cast them as political. So I just want to say that I think these recommendations are well considered, and I'm thankful that the administration has brought them forward. I would like to make one request, and it's not in this particular version of this plan, but as things move forward, if we see an increase in quarantines and have a significant number of children that are out of the classroom, that we would look at offering the ability for those students to have access to materials and participate. But I don't think that that is something that at this particular time that is required. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. I'd like to recognize Dr. Meyer, who has her hand up online.
Thank you, Peter. I support the health and safety recommendation plan as it stands for numerous reasons. I'm going to kind of date myself here, but I remember in 1987 when seatbelt laws were passed, and it created quite an uproar. And people said they should have the right to choose. About a year and a half later, my father died in a car accident. He was an avid seatbelt wearer, and he still passed away. He was the one who got us to wear our seatbelts. Even with that said, I recognize that seatbelts keep us safe, that they weren't popular, but we've learned, and I've learned, that I will do what I need to do. I guess, hold on, let me step back here. Nothing is 100% fail-proof. Not seatbelts, not masks. However, if it means keeping children safe, the research I've done personally the past couple of weeks, I read some articles. There was a study out of North Carolina, Duke Medicine, that looked over 1,000 students in North Carolina in masking, and their conclusion was masking kept students safe. So if there's a chance that masking saves kids, I'm going to go for it. And I hear people say that, COVID doesn't affect kids. And it's not. Although it is now up to the 10th leading cause of death of children in the United States. It doesn't cause the amount of deaths as it does in adults. But for me, the question is, if I vote against masking and something happens to one child in Pine-Richland, whether it's long-term effects, whether it's being in the hospital, or Lord forbid, death, I could not live with myself. So I will be voting for these reasons for masking, because I believe that's what the science says, and I will do anything to keep children safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Carla.
I obviously won't be voting for the policy. I get down to, we can parse a lot of data on safe, unsafe, but here's the bottom line. We're sitting here trying to make medical decisions for the people who best can make medical decisions for themselves and or their children are families themselves. We go to the doctor, we get advice from the doctor, we take that in, we research, we will make a decision based on whatever we're facing for our children. Parents can do that. That's not our job. We send our kids to Sky Zone. We make that choice because we know they can get hurt, but we allow them to do it. The parents make that decision, not us. I always go back, and I said this last year, it's the parents' rights, the family's decisions. When we wanted to put the survey out, I was not in favor of the survey. But when I look at the survey data, and I do believe that the 87 and 76% are very misleading, because what I saw was 50-50, which is pretty much where I thought it was going to turn out. 52% of staff said, 48% of staff said they would wear it, 51% of parents said they would let their kids go to school without masks. The best survey is the first day of school to not require masks and see who shows up with masks. That would be the way I would do it. If you choose to wear a mask, that is your right. If you think it protects you, that is your right. I've heard the statement that masks protect the other people, not you. I don't know what kind of mask you're wearing, but the mask I've worn don't have directions on them. They don't have a backflow preventer. They're a cloth mask that is made out of basically material that my t-shirt's made out of. The virus doesn't know which direction it's going. When I have to wear respirators at work, I have guidelines at the places where I go on how long I can wear them because they know it disrupts your breathing. I have a daughter that cannot and will not be wearing a mask for medical reasons. She has multiple medical conditions, but the biggest concern of the doctors when they say they don't want her masked is the fact that she has asthma and wearing a mask restricts her breathing. So if somebody who is compromised from a breathing situation is told by doctors, you shouldn't wear a mask because it prevents you from breathing, why would I think that would be any different for anybody else's kids? Kids do get sick. Kids will get sick. Kids will get this virus. It'll happen. But the mortality rate is extremely low. Any death would be tragic. But as some of the speakers said, kids get sick from a lot of things, and unfortunately sometimes they die. That's not what we want happening? Absolutely not. But what I want to do is make sure that that decision isn't made by me or anyone else on this board. It should be made by the parents who decide, I want to send my kids to school. I think that requiring masks is a slippery slope for us. The question that I'll ask to administration, I probably should ask this earlier, is we're saying we're requiring masks. My question is simply, or what? What are we doing? You know, we're saying masks are required, but clearly around 50% said they preferred not to have their kids wear masks. Approximately 24% said they're not willing. So my question is simply, or what? What are we going to do? Is there an outline for that? Is there a penalty for that, for the kids, for the parents? I want to know. I think that the parents should know that. And if we are going to have a penalty, I'm going to simply ask, how did we come up with that? So that's where I am. I will not wear masks myself. If it's required of me, I'm going to walk in here without a mask. If I'm asked to leave, I'll do it virtually, but you won't see a mask on my face again during the school year.
Matt, did you have any other comments?
I guess I have one other comment and question, right? If there's not an appetite to change this, can we at least decide that a one-size-fits-all isn't the best solution? So we can be debating 11 and under. In fact, that's what I thought we might do tonight. 12 and up, the decision's already been made by parents and the families who either chose or did not choose to get the vaccine. Give them the option to wear a mask or not. We can make that work. We could debate what to do 11 and under. So can we decouple 11 and under from everybody else and make optional 12 and up, and then let's continue to debate 11 and under. Even if we say required 11 and under for now, I could actually live with that. 12 and up, I can't. So is there an appetite to discuss that?
So I'd like to say that, and not in direct answer to your question,
that this is not just a personal health issue, it's a public health issue, and what each one of us does affects the other. And to what Dr. Mihalik was mentioning about the Delta variant is very contagious. It also, it can actually defeat the vaccine. So those who are vaccinated, it can still infect them, not at the same rate, not at the same intensity of symptoms, but it still does affect those who are vaccinated. And when the transmission is high in the community, it means that, that all of us can be carrying it, even if we've been vaccinated, and we can still infect others, and we can still be infected ourselves, even if we are vaccinated. Not as much of a possibility, but it still is possible. We are a public institution. We are charged with educating our students, all students. And as we understand that the best way for them to be educated is in person. And so we need to give them all a chance to be educated in person safely. So and in following not our own personal preferences, but guidance from science and from the experts in those areas, whether it's the government organizations, the CDC, the Pennsylvania Department of Health, in our case for the state of Pennsylvania, the Allegheny County Health Department for more local. Becoming more local would be our own Healthcare Leadership Council, that we have experts who are healthcare givers. They are in the research area, and they recommend masking now. Earlier in the summer, they did not, when the transmission level was low. The longer this virus hangs around and people don't get vaccinated and it is allowed to mutate, the stronger it can get.
Well, with all due respect.
So that's why I am going to support, and I think that it is the right thing to do for our students. The numbers that were quoted, the percentage rate of possibility of a child dying, as Dr. Myers said, even one is too much. And why is wearing a face mask so difficult when it can protect our children? And I think that we all agree that our children are the most important thing here.
Well, I believe I can protect my children.
Dr. Myers, raise your hand if we could.
Okay. I'd like to consider my hand up as well.
Exactly. Dr. Meyer? Carla, you're muted.
My apologies. I hate when I do that. I'd like to build on what Christine's saying, that this is a public health issue. And throughout our country's history, there's precedent for making these decisions. Children have vaccine cards. You enter kindergarten and you're required to have certain vaccines because it protects other students. Parents don't get to make that decision. To attend a public school, you must vaccinate your children with certain things. For my college-age son to attend college, he must be vaccinated for certain diseases. I don't get to make that choice.
So, may I? Carla, are you anything else?
I'm done. Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mark, and then Matt.
Okay, so I guess that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Thank God the CDC wasn't around during the 1776. They might say revolution would be bad for our health. So, so I asked a question about an appetite whereby a one-size-fits-all solution is not applied to the start of school, that we separate 11 and under from 12 and up. Now, Peter, you're much more skilled in procedural stuff than I. But I'd
If you
like
would-
to amend the motion.
Yeah, so I think that's understandable. So you would like to amend the motion to cover, I assume, K through 6 was your intention for the universal mask mandate? I assume your intention was for K through 6th grade?
Yes. If we could amend the motion to require K through 6, 11 and under, make optional parents' choice, 12 and up, grade 7 and up.
Okay, I'm looking around. Does everyone understand that? The amendment as proposed. We'll need a second to move to debate of that amendment.
Well, I'll second it for the purpose of debate.
Thank you. So we will now move, now, as procedure, we will vote on this amendment before we vote on the main motion. However, you know, both items really are debatable. Ms. Williams and I just actually looked this up and confirmed this. So you can talk about the main motion still, but I would encourage people to focus on the amendment, and if we can, either approve or get past that and then get to the main motion. I just think it helps keep things more clear. At this point, I have Dr. Mihalik and then Dr. Meyer queued up.
So I'm glad you brought up rights, individual rights. It's also well established that your rights end where another person's rights begin, that no one has a right to do harm on someone else, and that is the cornerstone basis of epidemiological public health. No one who works in public health goes about with the intention of destroying individual rights. That's not why they do the work that they do. They do it because it mitigates harms. It reduces risk. Risk may not be eliminated, but through common sense measures, it can greatly be reduced. So as far as the K through 6 through 12, that the vaccines are not 100% effective, there's an assumption, oh, you're vaccinated, so you can do whatever you want. That's not how it works. There's some probability that even when you're vaccinated, you can get the disease. It generally protects people from dying, but there are increasing cases of severe COVID reactions from the Delta variant among children, among people who are in the age range of 6 through 12, and also K through 6. The replication of the Delta variant, there's a technical term called R0, which is the average number of people that get infected when they're exposed to someone. The original variant that we had last year had an R0 of 3. It's at 9 now. And the latest research shows that with the current rates of vaccination, even with vaccination, that R0 is only going to be reduced to 4. So with vaccination, the Delta variant is still more transmissible than what the variant was last year. Now, increasing vaccinations does reduce it further, but it doesn't reduce it to 0. There's ample evidence across the board that masking does reduce the transmission of virus. It's been well researched and well established. So it just makes sense to follow these guidelines, which makes sense from a public health perspective, that protects our children. It is not an extreme cost to anyone to do that. We ask our children to wear sports protective equipment all the time that's uncomfortable, and it's because it helps protect people.
Well, with all due
And
respect,
so, please, I'm not finished. Please.
I just
So-
love being told how to
Mr.
parent.
Kashani, Mark,
I love being
Mark,
told how to parent.
Mark,
I would
Mark,
prefer to be
Dr.
able to
Myers
finish.
queued up after you, please.
And so from these reasons, even though it is an inconvenience, we can protect people starting off on the right foot. This plan has a method to back it off as progress is made, as more people are vaccinated, as the transmission rate goes down in the community, then there's a pathway to back away from that. The data's all going in the wrong direction right now. It's going up exponentially.
Yeah, fear is paralyzing, Matt. Fear is paralyzing.
Data is not fear.
It is fear.
Smart decision-making is not fear. Intelligence is not fear. Expertise is not fear.
Oh, is that right? Am I not being intelligent?
I'm sorry.
Am I not being intelligent?
Please let me finish. To equate knowledge and expertise with fear is misleading and damaging, and I don't think it's the right way to go.
Well, and I
Thank
do.
you very much.
And I do, Matt.
Thank you.
We clearly have two different worldviews.
Mark, please. It's just been an issue sometimes, and we have online participants, and I want to get to Dr. Meyer. We will. Dr. Meyer.
Thank you. Just for historical accuracy, I want to make it clear that General George Washington required his troops to be inoculated for smallpox.
Thank you so much, Carla.
Additionally, because it's a health concern, we'll go back to that. It is, just like when I was talking about seatbelts, we as parents are required to put our children in car seats. We do not get to make that decision as parents, do we? Recently, they've increased the weight and the length of how long children have to be in car seats because the data suggested they were safer. As parents, we must follow that. They recently said children must be rear-facing for a much longer time. Once again, that is not a decision that we get to make. When it comes to safety and public health, there are limits to those rights. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer. Mark, I'm going to ask you if you would yield to Dr. Miller. That's your option.
I'm sorry?
I still had you queued up to speak, but I would ask if you would yield to Dr. Miller. That's up to you. Okay.
Thank you. So again, in the opening comments, this is 14,000 school districts across the United States, 500 Pennsylvania. Strong opinions on either side. In the beginning of July, we did not expect to make this recommendation to our board for how we start the school year. Cases were at the lowest level that we've seen. The transmission rates were low. People were enjoying the summer, and I mean, whether those are kids or adults, whatever, it felt good. That is not the situation with transmission now. As cases increase and the transmission level has gone from low to moderate to substantial to high, we know, we guarantee, because we saw it all last year, when it's high in the community, it's higher in the schools. When it's lower in the community, it's lower in the schools. We've seen it. The other school districts around us have seen it. We absolutely believe in the concept of what you suggested, Mr. Kashani. So we do and I'm speaking for the administration as we talk to the Healthcare Leadership Council, we do see a difference between 11 and under, where a vaccine is not yet available, and 12 and over. We do believe that there will be a time and a place where we maybe think differently about that. And we put that on the one slide because I think that's appropriate. What are the conditions? What are we learning? What are we seeing in our schools? And I believe there will be a time where a recommendation, middle school, high school, becomes different than a recommendation at our primary schools in Eaton Hall, but it'll be based on conditions, based on cases, based on our learning and experience, and based on the recommendations from the agencies and experts that support us. In addition to the health benefits, one of the things that I've not heard in much of the deliberation is around the disruption that can happen in schools for students who may be quarantined for a period of time. Not because they're ill. Quarantine is for healthy, we've learned that. But what we have had the opportunity to see around the country in places that start school earlier than Pine-Richland is we have seen schools that have had to shift significantly in their learning models to high numbers of quarantined students, in some cases to virtual settings. It's not fear. That's what's happening out there. And so our recommendation to start this way was really a recommendation only to start this way for all the reasons mentioned, but more importantly, because we share the belief that in-person learning, and when I say in-person learning, I mean regular in-person learning, not disrupted by being out for 5 to 10 days or something for quarantine, that is the top goal. And if we can achieve that goal while transmission rates are at the highest level we've seen in a period of time, and who knows, a month from now, if they're different, we will understand that differently because we monitor this stuff. I'm frustrated as parents are. I understand. What I can say from my perspective is if we have the chance to have 99.8% of our students, K through 12, in our schools and keep them there and keep them involved in activities for this inconvenience, then as the data and information change, as our experience in the 21-22 school year grows, we can come right back here as we have and talk about what does that mean. So again, I only say that because we do and have talked about and support the fact that there might be a difference between 11 and under and 12 and older at some point, and the transmission levels and what we're learning is also critical to this.
Well, and I respect the fact that it's important to be in person this year, right? So there's no doubt about that. However, I think that to go from where we were up until last Friday to where we are now wasn't about face. When that survey was asked of our community, and I was curious to see the data, but I answered it presuming that in-person learning would occur without a mask. And when I asked my daughter, what's worse, going to school with a mask on all day long, or taking the risk that you might have to quarantine if you meet she'd rather quarantine. That spoke volumes to me. And I'm sure she's not alone with a lot of other kids who dread the idea of sitting in class all day with a mask on because we're worried about it as adults. We're trying to protect everybody. You can't get to zero risk. You can't. You got to live life. So why not start the year, if we're going to try to compromise right now, let's try to start the year just on a different footing. So maybe the compromise is what we proposed. And I hope that it can be. I hope there's 5 of us who would vote for this amendment.
I think Carla or Gosh, I can't see somebody, I think, raise their hand, but then I'd like to get in the queue.
Ms. Swope or Dr. Meyer, did you guys raise your hand? I may miss it as well, so,
I think Carla's talking, but she's on mute.
okay.
I was just going to call it a question.
Yeah, and I don't even know if that's necessary. Is there any other, because it's a formal 2/3 vote, so is there any other discussion on the amendment?
I do have a question, and Mark hit on it at the end. So, my question...
Dr. Meyer, technically, Dr. Meyer's called the question. Dr. Meyer, do you want to go to a 2/3 vote? We can go immediately, or we yield to...
I'll yield.
Thank you.
My question is simple. So, there has to be some sort of algorithm where everyone gets to, because it changes, right? The risk went up, and we said the risk of getting the infection or getting the disease. We've heard what the real numbers are on the risk to students, even under the ones who can't get vaccinated. We know what the risks are to those who are vaccinated. So my question is, when do we get to the point where we're comfortable with that risk level? What is that? Because it seems like, and I asked this question last year, it seems like what we're trying to head to is 0 incidence of COVID. We are not going to see that again in our lifetime. This thing is here, it's here to stay, it's like influenza. There will always be a mutation. It's a virus, it's how these things work. So my question is, if we're gonna vote on something to say, hey, let's require masks, at what point, I mean, there has to be a number that says, at this risk factor, we switch. I don't think that exists, because I think all we're doing is we're taking temperature of which way the wind's blowing, and that's the way we're going. Again, that's why I say let's put it back to the parents. They know the risks. Let them make the decision. I am not in favor of a split between K-6 and 7 through 12, but I would vote for it simply because it would put a lot of kids back to school without a mask. So I would vote for Mark's option, but I'm not in favor of it because I think it should be everyone. But
Dr. Mihalik.
Thanks. I just feel the need to correct the record. We don't know the risks. The statistics that were cited, they were based off of a virus that had a much lower transmissivity level. And when you have a virus that transmits at much higher rates, at least 3 times as high, then the number of problematic and negative outcomes also goes up pretty substantially. Nobody knows what that relationship is. But all experts who study risk in disease transmission believe that mitigating is the right thing to do by wearing masks and following protocols to protect people's health. It is a calculation based off of the data and what is known. And so that's important to put on the record. Anyone who says parents know the risk, the parents don't know the risk unless you study and know R naught and know RE and understand transmissivity of viruses. Then you don't really know the risks, and you're just acting out of the hope that everything will be okay. That might be okay, but from a public health perspective, it's not the responsible way to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mihalik. I'm going to refer back to Dr. Meyer's motion. If there's no objection, I'd like to call the question and move to a vote on the amendment. This still retains the original motion for action. Is there no objection? We can skip right to that vote.
to be clear, we're voting on Mark's motion to split the grades.
Yes.
So
Okay. Understood online, Dr. Meyer? Mrs. Swope?
Yes.
Okay.
So I have here, we're voting on motion to amend the recommended health and safety plan not to include required masking for students ages 12 and up.
Yeah, let's do a roll call just for clarity, if we could.
Mrs. Hayden?
No.
Mr. Moy?
No.
Mr. Lyons?
No. Sorry.
Mr. Kashani?
Yes.
Mrs. Mizbach?
No.
Mr. DiTullio,
Yes.
Mrs. Swope,
No.
Dr. Meyer.
No.
2 yes, 7 no.
Okay, so
Oh,
the
I'm sorry,
motion-
Dr. Mihalik.
I would like to
I
be
just
able to
saw, yes,
vote,
I'm
please.
sorry, Dr.
Yes,
Mihalik.
thank you. No.
Sorry about that.
The motion to
Motion.
amend fails. The original motion, which is our health and safety plan with universal K through 12 student and staff masking, remains subject to debate. Anyone else like to comment on the plan before we? So
I
will-
still would like an answer on the or what, just the requirement or what.
Yeah, so
I
you
think
were talking
Jamie's
about
gonna-
the, right, the trans, and I think, well, there may be an answer in terms of the transmission levels. I mean, we were getting guidance, Greg, for me, right, and we'll talk about the CDC. We've moved from substantial into high. So as sort of a, I would hope, if we move back down into moderate, that we see some change in recommendations or we reconsider the question. And we did see different recommendations initially from the CDC that were based on those levels. Are they arbitrary? Every number is arbitrary, I mean, you know, but so they draw the line somewhere. So there are places where they've indicated different levels of risk, and we're in the high risk. That's not just not zero, it's high. It's not moderate, it's not low, it's high.
It's high risk of getting sick. It's not necessarily high risk. And to Dr. Mihalik's point, we don't know what it's going to do, but the trend hasn't been there that associates the higher transmission. Yes, more people are getting sick, but the uptick in mortality hasn't been seen. So that's one thing. Now the data is relatively new, so to speak, but we haven't seen that. But my question was more to the point of masks are required, so it's not a mandate. So they're required. So my question is, or what? So administration's going to have to deal with if somebody decides not to mask. What is the implication?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? And that's why we put other considerations on here. It's why we wrote, and I'll look at it, full and regular in-person school attendance is an extremely positive step towards normalcy. People are tired, frustrated, have different opinions. We get all of that. So you're asking, you know, sort of are you going to, right? What's the consequence, right? So the first thing I would say is, it is my hope that our school community, who is governed by elected officials, that go through a process that has been detailed, informed, whether people agree or disagree, we have communicated about it, talked about it, read about it, and ultimately, we have a decide model. It's being debated, and then the board will take action. It is my sincere hope that when we share a decision of the board, if it's to support the way we're starting the year, for the reasons that are articulated, which is keeping kids in person as a top priority, it is my sincere hope that we will have students and staff, families, who are willing to support that, so as not to create an environment in the schools where mask or no mask and what are the consequences or what are the next steps and how do we work through that becomes the focus point of every day. That's my sincere hope. There are reasons that we articulated here, and there are absolutely students who meet these reasons. So parents who would submit a request for exemption, if it would either cause or make a medical condition worse, including respiratory issues like you mentioned, or impede breathing, respiratory issues that impede breathing, a mental health condition, or disability. So my hope would be Those who need an exemption for medical reasons would be able to get one. And we would respect that as we did last year. My hope is that that would not be abused for the short term, for the start of the year, as conditions are high and the Delta variant is the predominant variant out there. That would be my hope. Because otherwise, we're not going to be focused on learning. We're going to be focused on trying to implement and communicate and have relationships. I mean, it's just not ideal for anything. So what would we do? We would probably call the parents and talk to them. Probably not the student, because we don't want to put the student in the middle of that conversation. We would probably document that conversation, and then we would work through steps to try to understand what are our next steps and how we're going to do it. Not good. And I'm hopeful that, like last year, when the same exceptions were in place, we had about 30 students across the district, ballpark, 32 I think was the number, who did not wear a mask. We had a smaller number of students and some staff members who wore face shields. Face shields, as we understand it, are less effective, but better than nothing. And so that's, again, something that we would talk about and consider. But I'm hoping the question you ask doesn't become the focus at the Pine-Richland School District. In-person learning, not marred by quarantine or disruption, and that when we come back together, the number isn't zero. It wasn't zero last year when you asked that question. We never said that. Didn't say it today. The healthcare experts that we have on the Leadership Council who have children in schools at all levels, they represent a diverse set of fields within the healthcare and medical professions. In July, the feedback was, if not now, when? And that was with optional masking. The numbers weren't zero then, but we were in the low transmission area with declining numbers. It was a different thought process. The American Academy of Pediatrics, I mean, they're the body of physicians that generally support adolescent care. I mean, those are input. Their position is, again, similar to the revised guidance by the CDC. So I hope that this, once decided upon, to start the year, not forever, to start the year, I'm hopeful that we can communicate that and that the shared desire for in-person learning overrides all of the other stuff. And we can have teachers and students meeting each other. We can have relationships beginning to form, not ideally, but in person. And then, hopefully, with different trends and different information, we can get to a place where we make other decisions. And again, my 2 cents, based on everything I continue to read, learn, ask, and know, is that the answer to when might it shift may be different 12 and older versus 11 and under. I understand for those who disagree. You know, we've heard and understand all of that. But I think that's the most flexible and constantly monitoring and being willing to adjust and communicate. It's not like flipping a switch. I don't think we're not going to wake up in the morning, see something, and hit an e-blast. But we thoughtfully look at that. And if we were able to start the year successfully with continuity, with limited cases or limited quarantine, hopefully none, that'd be awesome. If we come back together and we say, what have we experienced? What's happening in our schools? What do we know now? What do the transmission levels look like? And if they're getting better, maybe we hang tight a minute and then we talk about when to make a change. I wish there was a clear and bright line that I could say that, you know, we have some crystal ball here that it's this and this. If these set of conditions are in place, then we go to this. I wish I had that. I don't. But my mind is trying to get us back towards normalcy, and how do we do that in a way that best protects in-person learning? That's sort of where we are. So.
I think you covered most of what I wanted to say. I just wanted to say it pretty clearly that for what? It's to keep our schools open, to keep our activities going, and to keep our children in the best possible low-risk situation that we can offer. That's the reason to wear masks in school.
Thank you, Dr. Mahoney. I do want to thank this board for the respectful way that you've engaged in these deliberations. I do. I apologize for the extra formality in terms of yielding, et cetera, but in this format, I think it's for the best. This is, well, as I said at the top of the meeting, this isn't Pine-Richland alone that is dealing with this. Thousands of school boards, hundreds within Pennsylvania alone. And the situation has changed since just a month ago when we entered the substantial zone when I came into this meeting. 2 weeks later, I come into another meeting, we're now in high. When you go about the community, it's clear that masking, once the norm, has become the exception once again. It's partly due to the season. We're outside, we're out of doors, it's not necessary. That's where most of our congregate settings are right now. But as the school year begins, there's really no analogy in what we go about in our daily lives as adults for having 1,500 kids come into this building in classrooms with 24 or more children. Tighter accommodations than probably any of us face in our workplaces. Meanwhile, those workplaces, generally without controversy, require vaccinations, require face masks. Throughout this community, those who work in those places would know that. It's a reasonable proposition. The compromise is we're not requiring vaccinations. We're not requiring COVID testing to participate in athletics. At the 12 to 18-year-old age in our county, only slightly more than 40% of the population is fully vaccinated. A very disappointing number. The best way to have avoided this decision would have been for better uptake among adults and adolescents of the vaccine. That didn't happen. I encourage families to talk to their doctor about the vaccine and consider doing their part to combat this disease. That is the best way. What is left to us is this option. Universal masking may be the best way to ensure continuity of learning 5 days a week in class for as many students as possible in Pine-Richland. It's avoiding the quarantines. It seems almost impossible. Why don't we wait till we get to the quarantines? Well, fortunately, that experiment's been run in the United States. Other states have opened their schools, and the quarantines are creating disastrous interruptions to learning. We were told time and again that should be our priority. Focus on learning, focus on the kids. And now that we are, I don't feel that we're making a political decision. The reality is this. The scientific consensus is clear. The Centers for Disease Control, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Pennsylvania Department of Health, the Allegheny Health Department, our own Healthcare Leadership Council. These are the agencies that are entrusted to make these decisions. I don't do original research. Nobody who's spoken here tonight does really medical research. Cutting and pasting articles you find on Facebook does not qualify as research. At best, you can cite some journalistic articles. We don't do research. We are not epidemiologists. We are rarely medical doctors. We see the guidance from those agencies. We evaluate it. We seek to understand the basis for that guidance. Around the edges, yeah, it's appropriate to question it. But the fact that you can get somebody with an MD to say any crazy thing to get clicks on the internet these days makes me very skeptical of a number of the claims that I hear being circulated in this community. The consensus is clear. Masking will help prevent the widespread quarantines that are keeping students out of school already in some parts of the country. As I said at a previous meeting, those who argue for parental freedom, those calls ring hollow with me. You do not have the freedom that you seem to assert you do. You know your kid best. Come to me and tell me that your 14-year-old is a great driver and a responsible daughter, so we'd like her to be able to drive to school because it's more convenient for us. Seems reasonable, right? We don't allow that as a society. We have rules. That's the civic part of society. The CDC gets a bad rap these days. It's a government agency. Ooh, a government agency. And we think we value the individual. Let's be clear. Parental choice didn't eliminate malaria from Florida. The CDC did. Let's be clear. Our children don't have polio because of vaccinations and medical requirements and experts, not because of parental choice. It's that simple. I'm not happy about it. Not happy about the mess. But we've turned basic medical advice from agencies that have a long-standing history of making qualified public health decisions into a political football. I can't imagine why. These things weren't that political before, and they were made all the time. As Dr. Meyer pointed out, even at Valley Forge. No further comment. Move to a roll call vote.
Mrs. Swope,
I vote yes for the plan.
Mrs. Misbach,
Yes.
Mr. Moy,
Yes.
Mr. Lyons,
Yes.
Dr. Meyer,
Yes.
Dr. Mihalik,
Yes.
Mr. DiTullio,
No.
Mrs. Hayden,
Yes.
Mr. Kashani.
No.
7 yeas, 2 noes.
Thank you, everyone. Motion carries. Item 3.01 is a consent agenda. A motion to approve items 3.02 through 3.10 is listed below.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, say yes.
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 Opposed? Opposed. Motion carries. Guys, I was going to suggest if you want to take a recess, we can get through this agenda. There's some items to discuss, but or do you want to just keep plowing through? Anyone need a break? Okay. Mr. Kashani, Finance.
Item 4.01, motion to approve the financial reports dated June 30th, 2021, and accounts payable dated August 16th, 2021, in the amount of $103,802.90, and paid accounts for July, August in the amount of $2,795,252.97, as listed.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor say yes.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
Item 4.02 is information only. No budget transfers until October. And then 4.03 is a reminder that we have our next finance governance meeting, December 13th at 6.
Thank you, Mark. Mr. DiTullio, Buildings and Grounds.
Item 5.01 is an action item. Motion to approve a grant, to grant a contract, with the Redevelopment Authority of Allegheny County for 2020 Gaming and Economic Development Tourist Fund Grant in the amount of $250,000. This will be used to offset a portion of the Field 6 project costs. which I believe were part of our budget anyway. Am I correct?
Second.
Yes,
Thank you.
that's correct.
Is there any discussion? You saw Ms. Beck second, you got that? Okay. All those in favor say yes?
Yes.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
Item 5.02 is a motion to approve a 3-year extension of our current agreements with Direct Energy on the Columbia Gas System and UGI on the Peoples Natural Gas System, which will cover the time period of September 1st, 2022 through August 31st, 2025.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say yes?
Yes.
Yes. Opposed? Motion carries.
Item 5.03 is a motion to approve a repair by, is it FU Refrigeration? Of the high school cafeteria walk-in freezer by replacing the condensing unit at a cost of $15,500.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say yes?
Yes.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
Item 5.04 is an information item that we will consider at the September meeting, and it will be a motion to approve the attached contract for professional services from Tower Engineering for rooftop unit replacement at Wexford, Hance, and Richmond Elementary in the amount of $56,200.
Second.
Information.
I think
sorry.
that's for next day.
Oh, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
sorry. Any discussion on that?
So I just had a question. Does that have anything to do with the overall, what we looked at like a year or so ago for the
Mr. Zimmerman's here, so I'll give him a chance.
Yeah, it does. It's part of the capital funding plan. It has been for the last couple of years. We are going to offset those replacements with the SR3 money. This is just planning process to spend that money properly. So we had Tower Engineering come in. They're going to act as our architecture and engineering firm for this to spec out what we need. They'll put together a bid package, and if it's approved at the next meeting, they'll go ahead and get that bid package ready to go for December, January of this year for a summer 22 installation.
Okay, thank you.
If there's no further discussion on that, I would move that 5.04 be put into a consent agenda if there's other items that make sense at the September meeting.
Makes sense.
5.05 is an information item on preventative testing. The district continues to take proactive and systematic approach to preventative testing. The latest rounds of air testing samples had very positive results with no issues, and the results are attached for public consumption. And Mr. Zimmerman spoke with Radon Detection and Control in July. They indicated that radon does not need to be tested again until 2024 based on our previous testings that have been done. Any discussion on 505?
Yeah, just a request on this. So this report shows counts of different mold spores. It says that they're all below limits, but the report doesn't give what the limits are. So if it's possible to request from a contractor to display what the value they're using to interpret a limit, I think that would be beneficial.
Yeah, we can talk to Mr. Kopar. And I'll determine, do you happen to know the answer if there's an absolute limit? Because I don't believe there is. What they look at is the outside air compared to the inside air, and they look at the relationship between those two things. There are certain numbers in the list, if you will, that even a small amount is of concern, whereas in other cases it really is a function of the outside air. So we'll be happy to talk with him about that. And the one thing I would mention, Mr. DiTullio, and you certainly know this, we do a ton of testing that is not required in order to, and then we share the results like this. So we have water tests that are being done again, correct? Lead and water tests are being done again. And we started this practice a few years ago, and I think it serves us well and our buildings well. So it's a good, like this, for example, is sample indoor air quality tests taken from all of our schools, just to ensure that we have that measure. So again, some positive things.
If there's no further discussion on 505, we'll get into, okay, sorry. I thought I saw someone raise their hand. 5.06 is an information item on summer projects, and Mr. Zimmerman, I'll send this over to you.
Okay, I'll just brief the sheet a little bit here. The projects that are listed from the blue on up will be completed by start of school. The only one on there that's in blue is the very bottom one, is the gym door replacement. Those are on order. Those are probably going to be done during a break that we have, like a long weekend or something, because we have a long lead time for those doors. Everything else that's below that in the light yellow are projects that we're going to execute through this first semester up until Christmas. Some of those have long lead times. Others, we just didn't have the manpower to get done this summer, but we're going to keep executing those. Those are all projects that are on the capital funding plan. But everything above the blue will be finished by start of school.
Thank you.
And thank you for the additional detail. I know we asked for that, I think, last time. Mrs. Swope, Student Services.
Yes. Item 7.1, donation of elementary percussion kit. Motion to accept in accordance with Board Policy number 702, and with sincere gratitude, donation of elementary percussion set by an anonymous staff member at a value of approximately $495.
Second.
And we are grateful. Any discussion?
Thank you to the staff member. That was very kind. Yeah.
Agreed. All those in favor say yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Motion carries. Dr. Mihalik.
Thank you. Item 8.01 is a motion to approve the personnel, supplemental, and transportation items as attached.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say yes?
Yes.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
Item 8.02 is a motion to authorize the superintendent and director of human resources to hire staff as necessary after August 16th, 2021, to be formally approved by the Board of School Directors at the September 13th, 2021 school board meeting.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Just for clarification, where are we on staffing and what kind of positions? We're not talking any Act 93. This is the standard, any additional teachers, paraprofessionals, maintenance staff, things like that. Am I correct, Mr.
Glickman has an update for
Okay.
where we are, status update.
Yeah, I can speak to that, Mr. DiTilio. So, in the space of teaching positions, we have 2 remaining permanent vacancies we're looking to fill. One at Eden Hall, one at our middle school. We also have currently 4 positions that will begin as substitutes that we're looking to fill, one of which I received a recommendation earlier tonight. So those numbers are shrinking. Paraprofessionals, we have 1 permanent position as well as 1 substitute need to start the year. Beyond that, for school-based positions, right now, what we're feeling for sure is within our facilities department. If you looked on our personnel items on our resignations, we have a number of recent resignations from custodians. That's giving us currently 4.5 positions to fill within that workforce group. Cafeteria monitors, playground monitors, kindergarten aides, a grand total of 2, 4, 5 of those split between 3 schools. And that's most of it in terms of the space of readiness for start of school.
Thank you.
We need to vote.
Yeah, we need.
Yeah, no, I moved off the agenda and I have to get back to the motion to read it. Sorry. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor say yes.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Matt. Mr. Moy.
Sure. Item 9.01 is a motion to partner with.
Matt, I think your mic's off.
Nope. Really? No, just not close enough.
There you go.
Item 9.01 is a motion to partner with Gallagher Risk Management Services to bring affordable optional device protection to Pine-Richland families at a cost, at no cost to the district.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say yes. Yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 10.01 is simply a reminder of our public joint governance meetings, which will take place on September 13th, October 4th and 18th, and November 15th.
Just a question on the September 13th. I know that the DEI committee kind of took a break over the summer. Are they meeting before this meeting?
We were just mapping out, so let me see. Are you talking about the council? Is that what you were
Yeah, I'm
referencing?
sorry, the council.
Yeah.
I am correct. It was, the last meeting was in May?
That is
Or
correct.
April? And then.
Actually, it was we had one in June, right before the end of the school year.
Okay,
with the council.
okay, early in June.
Yeah.
But are they meeting before this?
The next leadership council meeting, we were tentatively thinking the 22nd, but we wanted to review that with our internal expanded team the week prior, so no, it should come after that, based on the timeline that we have. Again, tentatively, we didn't run it by anybody yet in terms of that.
Okay, so based on our last meeting that we had joint governance on DEI, does it make sense to meet before or after the next council meeting? Because I think a lot of the information that we had deliberated on came from that. It's just a question, everyone. We kind of vetted out a lot of the things that were covered in the last council meeting, sorry. Just a question that I'll throw out there. If we're meeting a week and a half before the council meets, thoughts?
I think, yeah, it's a good thought, Greg. I mean, so the council, those on the council, and the meetings that the council has influences the content of what we would talk about in the governance meeting. So I think the spirit of your comment, I think, is positive that, you know, if the council is going to influence what we talk about, then we should maybe meet after the council meets.
I would go further and say, you know, frankly, this is an environment of just complete conspiratorial, crazy thinking, especially around this topic. We've gotten communications with accusations of topics being considered that are just out of this, you know, outer space.
But that has nothing to do with what we're talking about.
I'd rather not have a meeting that's not public on this topic.
We're not talking about a non-public meeting, Peter. We're talking about the council that was created to get input that influences what we talk about in this public meeting is after this meeting.
Right.
So we're just talking about flipping the order.
But that's a non-public meeting then, wouldn't it be?
It is a non-public meeting that influences the content in the public meeting.
Right. No, I understand. So I understood all that, and I'm saying, at this point, it's just very hard in this environment. I'd rather address how we're doing that and discuss that openly and publicly here.
Adjusting the council timeline is, we have not communicated. This was just internal conversation about when we would hold the council meeting. We can absolutely make adjustments to that without a problem and have that prior to the board committee meeting.
What I'm suggesting, Greg, is that the order, although I hear what you're saying, like you sort of have the council and then the governance committee. Perhaps for this body to deliberate in the joint governance is how we want that council to operate going forward. because of my concerns. That's what I'm asking be considered by this body, whether that be in the joint governance or even this evening.
We can make it work either way. I appreciated Greg's comment because of it made sense, but we'll make it work either way because nothing's getting approved until there's enough public meetings to truly vet what we're going to be talking, what we would approve. So
my question was simply around, what content will we be discussing different than the last joint diversity, equity, and inclusion joint governance meeting, which I can't think of the date off the top of my head. If the council hasn't met, I guess what new information are we going to have? I mean, we can. It was a simple question that if we wanted more input, it just seemed reversed. I was just curious how that was working. I'm good. The date works for me, but
here's one thing I was just thinking about looking at the 4 meetings. If we were to flip the educational model update scheduled for November, if we push that up to September 13th and push everything down 1 meeting, so educational model update becomes September 13th, DEI then October 4th, sustainability October 18th, model for teaching and learning November 15th. If we flip and move down, we're going to be 2 weeks into school. I think it would be a great time to use that hour to talk about how has the school year started, what's happening in our schools, what's going on with cases, what's transmission like that'll be a nice work session. So I could see benefit to doing that.
And then that gives time for the council to meet.
I mean, it's the most timely topic is just how is school started, what's going on in the schools, what are, all of the stuff that we spent time on tonight. So it's another option.
It makes sense to me.
I like that option.
I'm okay with it.
Okay. So you got that, Barb. So we're going to, September 13th will be educational model update, which really is going to be a focus on what we talked about tonight, the health and safety plan. Let's add health and safety plan to the title so there's no confusion about what that is.
Okay.
And then everything else moves down 1 spot.
Got it.
So for all of us, it's easy because they're already on our calendars, but Barb has to do all the work.
Actually have to re-advertise these officially. So we advertise every joint governance meeting and board meeting. So we'll have to that's what it is.
Thanks.
Item 11.01, reports. I did ask Ms. Williams to post the AIU updated strategic plan, which is also on their website. Attached here is the long version of the plan. We developed this plan with our new executive director, who of course was hired a month before COVID-19 and took his office 3 months after that. So quite a lot of challenges had to be overcome to develop this plan. It embodies a lot of input from the widest variety of stakeholders you can imagine, given the IU's incredibly diverse footprint, literally over 100 different programs, many disparate sources of funding. We think of it here as a school district, we think of it as a sort of service provider for services that we can't offer in the district ourselves. And that is true, but it is such a small percentage of what the AIU does and all the people in the county that it serves. So I would really encourage you to look at that strategic plan as a great exemplar of both where we are now, but maybe more importantly, where we're going as an organization.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to say how much I appreciate seeing the goals laid out very clearly in the objectives and timeline. This is something that we haven't seen as neatly packaged and organized in the past. And so you can see a lot of work went into this and a lot of thought and the span across the different goals as well. So just a word of congratulations to everyone that worked on this plan and how much it's appreciated.
Yeah, I agree with Matt. When I looked at it, it's really it's easy to read, it's inviting to read, and it's interesting. Lots of good information in there that's easy to follow, very well put together.
I will tell you, and we've been pushing for that as a board, and it's something I've been talking about since I joined that board. And my experience in Pine-Richland, and when I share those experiences of what a living strategic plan looks like, when I share the public updates and people's, it clicks. So getting the buy-in from the board to move in this direction and to understand what it means to have a strategic plan with very specific measurable outcomes, a year-by-year guide to actions with purposes aligned behind them, was very exciting. But frankly, I learned most of it here in Pine-Richland, and we're very proud of it and look forward to to watching the organization move forward with this. Any other reports from the board or administration at this point?
Just we're super excited to bring the kids back, so really looking forward to it. A lot of things happen here in the next week and a half or 2 weeks before school starts. Our staff returns. We have new hire orientation this Wednesday. Our staff returns next Thursday. We are looking, and I'll send a communication to them in the morning, but we're looking to have our welcome back, which we haven't had here since 2019. We're going to have that at the stadium because it's easy. It's right here before we go on to the next thing, and that'll give us the option of optional masking because we're outside. But really want to get all 525 people together.
Can we come?
Yes, you're certainly invited, as always, to be present if you can be. And again, looking forward to seeing everybody come back, kids and staff.
Yeah, and I would just add, we think about over the summer, and like I said, last week, band camp started. But for so many of our students, it's amazing, they don't take the summer off. This campus is pretty active in the summertime as well. Hopefully you've seen that, taking advantage of resources like the Ram Cage, our stadium. We've been able to leave both of those facilities open to our community. And there aren't many times you go by there and you don't see students or families taking advantage of those resources. So that's wonderful. Last week is always a good kickoff with band coming back and football getting going. And then this week is officially the start of fall sports. And it's as active as you can imagine. So we do appreciate, again, over time, the community and board support with those facility enhancements. This year going in, Jeff and I were just walking the swimming pool area and seeing the changes that are happening there for the swimming teams and those that use the pool. We talked about the scoreboard, the donation for the sound, the timing system. It's just really awesome to see, so we appreciate that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We now move to our second recognition of visitors. Ms. Williams, do we have?
We have two.
Thank you.
Our first speaker is Eli Santiago. Is he here to speak? Okay. And our second is Brigitte Anol.
Hi, I'll keep my remarks brief since you guys ended up passing the recommendation. I did email all of the board members prior to, but I didn't hear my name mentioned in the list of people that emailed when it was read earlier. So I just wanted to make a couple of points from what I heard based on other people who spoke today, and then also by a couple of comments by the two board members who wanted to split the recommendation based on 7th through 12th and K through 6th. I have children across both of those levels. I have a kindergartner, a 4th grader, a 6th grader, and an 8th grader. My 8th grader, yes, I had a choice to get him vaccinated, and he is vaccinated. I'm like many of you, I hate these things. It's hard to breathe. I have a hard time hearing a lot of times when people are talking to me with the masks, as our words get mumbled a lot of times. So I would love to be without a mask. But my kindergartner, my 4th grader, and my 6th grader can't yet get a vaccine. If you were to split the district up and allow those 7th through 12th graders to go maskless because they have a choice to get vaccinated. Yes, my 8th grader is vaccinated, but he can still bring home and come home with COVID, as Ms. Beck stated. He may not get very sick. For him, it might be a mild infection, and I don't really worry that he'll end up hospitalized or even dying. But I don't know what the reaction my 3 younger children will have. And I don't want to play that Russian roulette, not with this Delta variant. I was just as hopeful as the rest of us at the end of summer when we ended school and things were looking so promising and we took our masks off. I was so happy to go out and about without my masks, and I even relaxed with my younger ones a bit, like even when shopping, allowing them to go. But now, I wear a mask even though I'm vaccinated because I don't want to bring anything home to my kids, and I'm certainly asking my kids to be vaccinated, or to wear masks, pardon, as well, because this variant, it scares me, I'm not gonna lie. Also, I just wanted to say that, yes, I think we're gonna live with COVID forever, Mr. DiTilio, and I get that, and it's gonna be, but what's different with this is that the variant seems to be changing and getting stronger and more contagious. This variant, they're saying, is as contagious as chickenpox was when we were younger. So, I mean, my kindergartner hates wearing a mask. If she sees that half her classmates aren't wearing a mask, how can I expect her teacher to know which parents want their kids to wear a mask and which ones don't? She'll just take her mask off because half her friends aren't wearing it, and she hates it. I get it. I don't want the kids to wear them just as much as I do, but until there's a vaccine approved for 2 through 11, please, as a board, do the right thing, follow the science, just as you did tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it.
Is that all? Thank you, everyone, for your patience this evening and your engagement. Have a good night.